What's going on, all of you fantastic freelancers? My name is William, and we are back today with another discussion video on Anthem. But this time, we're going to be focusing on the game's critical path / campaign, its possible length, and how the story will continue in the endgame. But before we get started, some of the statements in this video are either educated guesses or my interpretation of dev statements. Now, I practically grew up on BioWare games from Knights of the Old Republic, both 1 and 2, the Mass Effect and Dragon Age series, and spent a good 5 or 6 years of my life playing SWTOR. Though aside from the fact that they are incredible games and many of which are ahead of their time in a variety of ways, what I really enjoyed the most about these games were the stories and characters BioWare was able to bring to life. Some stories spanning continents, others across planets and galaxies, and the relationships you would develop were meaningful. But more than that, it's the impact and the value behind BioWare's stories that stick with you. It's that moment of shock in KOTOR 2, when Kreia kills the remaining members of the Jedi Council, and really makes you question the previous events of the original KOTOR and everything you've done in KOTOR 2. It's the hard choices that have a serious impact on your world and your story and the people around you, like choosing between Ashley or Kaidan during the Vimir mission during Mass Effect 1, knowing that your decision will send one of them to their unfortunate end. The culmination of incredible storytelling and the characters within these stories are what define BioWare as one of the greatest companies in the gaming industry. However, Anthem is in a unique position, and one that BioWare hasn't really had to face before. That unique position being twofold. Anthem has to meet both hardcore BioWare lovers, who are used to a narrative that lasts the entirety of the game, not to mention story-driven side quests, while also meeting the casual and hardcore looter shooter and FPS players, whom many of which just want to beat the critical path as soon as possible to start working on the grind for gear, weapons, and so on. Can Anthem successfully find a happy middle ground without verging too far any which way? Let's break it down. First up is the promise of a fully developed world and story at launch. While I'm not ribbing on any one game in particular, as many live service games are guilty of it, but several of those games in the past have guaranteed a very well fleshed out story and a world at launch, but failed to deliver on that promise until later expansions. And even then, it's not complete. If there is anything on this list that I'm not concerned about in the slightest, it would be this. BioWare hasn't ever truly depended on DLC post-launch content to round out their world or their stories, and if anything, they use it to further your adventure and story and build on the already established universe. What's even better is Anthem won't have paid DLC, as the developers want to be able to add expansions at their leisure. During the Our World Your Story panel at PAX West last year, one of the devs expressed that if they wanted to expand upon Halleck and Faye's story, they could drop it next week if they so desired. This leaves a lot of narrative and post-content release control for BioWare, and I doubt anyone is complaining about the free aspect of DLC. But back to my point. At launch, I'm confident that Anthem will have a fully fleshed out story and lore, and a complete one at that. Of that much, I am sure, as I place my full faith in BioWare given their reputation and the transparency by the developers. However, it's not the completeness of Anthem's story that has me worried. It's the length of said story, and what form it will take after beating the critical path. As I said before, Anthem and BioWare have to find a happy balance between BioWare fans and looter shooter genre fans. While some longtime BioWare fans want a narrative that is as long as previous games, some looter shooter and FPS players could care less and want to get to that endgame as soon as possible. This leaves BioWare with the dilemma of how long to make the critical path / campaign. And as far as it stands right now, we really don't have too much to go off of, aside from tweets. When asked on Twitter, the developers give a response similar to, "It's how you play the game or it depends on how you play it." According to Mike Gamble, quote, "This is a good question, but a tough one to answer. Everyone is different. There's a lot of side missions, but some folks just want to rush the main story and then hit strongholds. It's a lot though. Personally, I've only played through everything a few times." While Ben Irving follows up by adding that it is apparently, quote, "a really hard thing to compare, so we aren't really commenting on the critical path length for Anthem. Depends on how you play, etc. Personally, I'm the type of player to do every side quest I can before continuing on the critical path, as I really just want to have the best gear and be as powerful as I can to handle the next campaign mission. I personally view the endgame grind as my reward for defeating the campaign and my efforts in the story, but that's just how I feel I'm getting my money's worth. However, this still doesn't address Anthem's critical path length. For a frame of reference, it takes on average about 11 hours to beat the vanilla Destiny 1 campaign, without any strikes or the Crucible, with the same for Destiny 2 if not an hour or two difference more, while the Division on the other hand takes roughly 21 hours to defeat the critical path. However, this is due to a variety of factors that really don't matter. You can find all of these stats on howlongtobeat.com. Now, this could just be a matter of the devs just saying that they don't know, as the game will apparently have a variety of approaches to take on the story, or they're just simply avoiding the question for a number of reasons. If it is the latter reason, which I highly doubt, the devs have been open and honest about everything so far, so their statements on the campaign's length really doesn't give me too much cause for concern. Though if Mike Gamble's tweet is to be believed, which I do believe it, there will be a lot of side quests to keep the narrative going, which is fine by me. Character interaction is character interaction, and story is story, no matter how we get it. If Anthem's campaign really has nothing to compare it to, then at this time, I really have no idea how any of us can even begin to figure out how long the critical path could take. My best guess, however, 17 to 20-ish or so hours of base game content, not including any activities such as strongholds or free play and so on. Perhaps not quite the length of BioWare's other entries like the Dragon Age series, but then again, I doubt anyone was expecting that. Though we aren't quite done yet. We've covered if Anthem will have a full and complete story and world established at launch, which I believe it will. And we've gone over the rather difficult question of how long the campaign/critical path will be. But what we don't know is what is left in store for us after the critical path ends and the endgame begins, at least as far as story is concerned. Recently, we have seen footage from IGN that interactable lore entries can be found everywhere in the world of Anthem, which will go into our codex. The codex will act as a library for what we have found and provide greater knowledge and information on past and current events, and possibly explain the strange phenomena in our world. These entries can be found in strongholds, bottom of caverns, ruins, ledges, and even within the walls of Fort Tarsus. But will this be enough to keep the Storyaholics and BioWare fans pleased once the endgame begins? I doubt it, but I also doubt the entire codex will be the only means of story once the endgame begins. Typically, once the critical path is over, there is still a good 3 or 4 hours of side quests and story left to play through. While this hasn't been confirmed, I'd be surprised if BioWare didn't implement some form of endgame story through quests. And even then, the story won't end there, as I've previously stated. There will be free story updates and DLC coming throughout the year to continue the narrative and expand on Anthem's world. But before we start winding things down, if you enjoyed the video and the content we produce on your game, Anthem, then please consider subscribing to the channel, as it really does help our growth and allows us to reach more freelancers just like you. My hope with this video, as with most of the videos that we have done so far in the past few weeks, is that we have managed to alleviate some of your concerns with Anthem and its campaign. However, if we didn't address everything or we missed a detail, please let us know in the comments section below to continue the conversation outside of the video. I read through all of your comments and I make every effort to respond to them as I am able. As always, a monumental thank you to our patrons for their incredibly generous donations and support. It has gone a long way to help us maintain the quality content we produce on this channel. I hope all of you fantastic freelancers have a phenomenal day as ever, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in the next video very soon. Onwards and upwards, freelancers. Excelsior.